You are at the Almighty Church of Rock with Cheap Trick, and I believe we have John Doe on the line. Let's do a little test here. Hey, John, are you there?
I'm here. Hello.
All right. Looks like we're okay. John Doe, thank you for joining the Church of Rock this evening.
You are so welcome. It's my pleasure.
I must give, before we start the interview, John, thanks to our friend Steve Weskirchen, who's here doing the interview with us this evening, and Sister Tracy is here as well.
Hello, guys.
Hey, John, how are you doing?
Good.
Good evening, John.
Good evening.
First of all, thank you for playing Portland recently with X. I saw the first night of the 2-run shows you did there, and that was fantastic, man.
You know, quality is job number one at the Universal X Corporation.
Hey, well, you know, you guys do a good job at that. Despite Billy not feeling real well, you guys put out a really fantastic show, so thank you for coming to Portland.
Absolutely.
Steve, Tracy, would you guys like to start the interview?
Sure. Hey, John. Well, congratulations on the new book that's out, Under the Big Black Sun, A Personal History of L.A. Punk. I got my copy and just read through that thing just like a firecracker. I really got to hand it to you on the style and the way you approached doing the book. It's not just a narration or a biography of what went down. You actually took members of people that were in the scene with you, and you have 12 people writing on the book their own version of what happened in that early LA punk scene in the early 80s. Was that how did you come up with the idea to do the book that way?
Well, it's the kernel of what the scene was about, because it was all about a community, it was all about a collaboration, and I didn't want to do the whole damn thing myself.
Good answer.
Way too much work and discipline, and I don't need that. Anyway, everyone was given a topic, and they told their story in terms of that topic. Jane Weedland of the Go-Go's, her topic was where she lived, because where people lived was where everybody exchanged their ideas, because nobody had any money. We wouldn't go out to bars or anything like that. We would just go to each other's apartment or houses or something and drink and exchange ideas and say what was and what wasn't punk rock. So she lived at the Canterbury, which was an old apartment building, and there were probably 15 or 20 apartments that were all punk rockers. So there was a lot of exchange of ideas and art and stuff like that. Henry Rollins' topic was what it was like for someone from D.C., which was a pretty small scene at the time, coming to L.A. and getting swept up in the hardcore scene. Henry is pretty familiar with all the other L.A. bands like the Weirdos and the Germs and Alley Cats and Us and things like that, so it was a whole different scene that he got swept up into. Dave Alvin's topic was talking about the influence of roots music on the punk rock scene and how that was, because they brought along Los Lobos, and there was another roots scene that came in to the LA punk scene. So
Right on.
everybody had a topic, and that way I had no desire to be the authority. I had no desire to tell one side of the story, and what ends up happening is you get some overlap, you get different people's perspective, and we were pretty even with like men and women, and so it's cool. I mean, I was just thrilled that everybody said, sure, I'll give it a shot, and we paid people, and that's good.
Excellent. Yeah, well, the title of the book itself, Under the Big Black Sun, A Personal History of L.A. Punk.
Hey, Steve, I don't want to interrupt you, but is there any way that you could turn yourself up a little bit? Because you're very quiet in my telephone.
Oh, sure, no problem. Is that better?
More.
Crank it up a little more, guys.
A little more.
Okay, man. Can you hear me now? Pretty good.
Better. Great.
Excellent. Right on. Well, I just wanted to say that the title of the book, Under the Big Black Sun, A Personal History of L.A. Punk, I mean, we as X fans were very familiar with the title Under the Big Black Sun as your fourth studio album produced by the late, great Ray Manzarek. But was there any reason that you chose that particular title and what it means to you for the L.A. punk scene?
Well, that was indicative of of how we felt about Los Angeles at the time. and it was, a great. Exene came up with that title, and it was a great description of Los Angeles the way that we saw it. Everyone else in the world thought of Los Angeles in terms of the Eagles and Farrah Fawcett and all that pop culture. And of course, we saw all the darkness and the Skid Row and all the weird misfits that we hung out with.
John, I'd like to interject. We were talking on the way over here tonight, Tracy and I, and she came up with a question that I thought was really awesome, and I'd like to see if she could ask that of you.
Yeah.
Well, basically, just recently we were having a conversation the other night with several friends, and we were talking about fame and, how many people that have actually achieved some level of fame and success in the music business, I guess in the entertainment industry per se, but how many people that, are actually happy, that have achieved some level of success and some level of fame, and are not well off, but, comfortable money-wise. But we were just curious, in your opinion, do you see a lot of other people in the industry or throughout the years that you've been playing with X and as an actor, do you find that most people who have achieved some level of success, of fame, are generally happy people? Or do you think that with fame comes so much pressure and so much, it's such a cutthroat industry? Do you find that people in the industry are generally happy people or not happy people?
Oh, so you saved you lured me in by some easy questions, then you hit me with the hard stuff. Huh?
I was really curious.
Is that the way you guys played out there in dance path?
No.
I see.
This was really a topic of conversation.
I'm just like some guy from Oakland, and I can be taken advantage of.
No.
No, I'm kidding. It all depends on how enlightened people are, and I mean that by, are you expanding? Are you contracting into just what concerns you? Do you look at other people? Do you have some introspection? And how much money did you get? How fast? Because I think a lot of people that get a lot of money very fast feel that they don't deserve it, and they usually have if they're in the arts, they probably have a low self-esteem to begin with.
Right.
So they think, I'm just a fraud, because everyone feels like they're a fraud. Whether you're maybe a doctor, a surgeon, or an airline pilot doesn't feel like he or her are frauds. But,
well, I guess then with introspection,
I would say a lower level of fame and fortune, you might have a better chance at happiness.
Good answer. I agree with that.
But I know plenty of people who are filthy rich and have to put on disguises to go outside.
Right, and that's kind of what we were thinking.
I know some people that have done well, but it's what you attract. If you go out with 3 bodyguards, and try to hide from people, then people are going to try to want to get you. And if you go out on your own and with maybe some, kind of security, one person or something like that, and you're fairly open to people, then they'll say, oh, yeah, there's that guy, he's cool, and then they move on.
Right. One of the things that we had said was that perhaps people who, are a little older, who have been in the industry a little bit longer, like you said, introspection, if you've been fortunate enough to make it through that far and still have, some credibility in the industry and still involved, still putting out records, but that you're older with, that comes wisdom, and those people tend to be happier. Unfortunately, it seems like you don't see a lot of people that make it that far, that are still in the industry, still putting out albums, and have learned from everyone else that they have seen maybe go the wrong route.
Well, hopefully they find someone who's a mentor, or they realize that they can. I mean, I believe that people do things, good or bad, until they get tired of them. And so if they're doing something that's no fun or that makes them upset or something like that, they'll keep doing that until they're tired of it, and then they'll stop.
Sure.
Well, thank you for addressing that.
Yes.
Well, flashing back about 40 years, I've heard you and Exene and others in the original punk movement, you talk about that when you guys first came out, the corporate rock was in just full control of everything, and that punk was sort of a result of that movement to bridge the gap between the fans and the bands. And can you maybe explain that a little and tell me, was that in any way intentional, or did that just sort of evolve?
It was very intentional. We were taking back, or what we felt, and this is something that Exene addresses in her chapter, because one of the main concerns or main feelings that she had about the scene is that we were part of this cultural revolution. And unfortunately, it didn't seem to stick, because corporate rock is still, full-blown and whatever. But at least we opened a door, and a lot of other, along with our friends and the bands in New York and London, we all said, you can do it yourself, so go forth and do it yourself.
Thank you for opening the door.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, it wasn't just me. It was lots of people, and I think it was because rock and roll had become stale, and it was a little bit very calculated and things like that, and so I think that was just like a natural result. And one of the reasons you mentioned Ray Manzarek, and one of the things that attracted him to our band was A, the poetry, B, he liked the way that Billy Zoom played guitar, but the main thing that he told us is that he saw a connection between us and our audience that he felt between the Doors and their early audience on the Sunset Strip. Ray first saw us at the Whiskey A Go-Go, where obviously the Doors played many, many times.
And he was on your first album also.
Yes.
Made an appearance.
4 records with us.
Oh, right. Hey,
Yep.
you co-wrote the book with Tom de Sevilla. Sevilla. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation on that. But I am not really familiar with him, but reading his chapter, I identified with that guy so much, because I was that guy who was reading the articles. I was pasting, tearing them out and learning about the bands and going to the gigs. Right. And so that really enthralled me, his whole take on it. Could you explain your relationship with Tom and how he helped you on this book? Because I haven't heard much about that yet.
Yeah. Well, Tom and my sweetheart, Chrissy, she and he would constantly hound me to write a book, and I said, I don't want to. And they would say, but it would be a great book. And I would say, I don't want to. And then he would say, but what about everybody else who needs to know about the Los Angeles punk rock scene? And I'd say, I could care less. I would say different words if I wasn't on the radio.
Thank you.
We appreciate that.
Anyway, so Tom and I are old friends. He's been in the music publishing business. He worked at ASCAP. He worked at Elektra. He was an A&R person at Elektra. Now he works for a publishing company, and so it was important for him to be part of it because he is the every kid. He is the 16-year-old who realizes, hey, wait a minute, this is cool. Hey, wait a minute, this is kind of real. Wait a minute, this is in my backyard. Wait a minute, this kind of pisses off my parents. Wait a minute, I can do this. I can be part of this too. So Tom started going to shows when he was probably 17 or 18, and that was in 1982, which is when the book kind of stops. It goes from 77 to 82.
Right. And as you state in your book, near the early 80s, part of that main original punk drama it had kind of ended in your mind and transformed into something else. And so can you maybe touch on that kind of that step from one part of that punk until it became popular, and then the whole mosh pit thing came about, and then violence got associated with it, which kind of a bummer.
In 76, 77, when I first moved to LA in the end of 76, there was hardly any live music in clubs, in 3 to 500 seat places. The Whiskey A Go-Go was mostly having disco. The Starwood, which is another place, there was very little live music from LA going on. All the LA stuff was through record companies.
Right.
So it was like taking a giant metropolis and saying, "Here, why don't you make live music happen?" And there were a lot of people that had been pushed out of other bands because they were too weird, and so punk rock was just kind of in the air. I mean, it all happened from New York to London to L.A. in a year and a half, maybe 2 years.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was time. So anyway, by the time 1980 came around, when we first put out our first record, the scene had gotten pretty big to where there could be 4 or 5 different clubs, maybe more, with 100 to 750 people in each one of them. So because of that, the scene started fracturing into more arty bands or more rockabilly bands or more hardcore bands. And right around that time, probably 79, Black Flag was coming up from Huntington Beach, and that's a pretty... that Huntington Beach sounds kind of sunny and nice, but it was actually kind of the ghetto at the beach. And they were playing faster and louder, and the kids that were coming up to see him were younger and didn't quite get the whole like everybody be nice to each other because we're all trying to make this thing happen.
Exactly.
And so there was a little more violence, and it caused the scene to just kind of split apart into different factions, but it was big enough to sustain all of that.
Right
so
on.
the original scene got kind of fractured into different types of music, but people associate Los Angeles more with hardcore punk rock
for sure,
than the other more eclectic style, which was the first thing.
I have a question. Actually, it's not really music related.
I'm sorry, really quiet.
I am a big fan of your films, actually.
Oh.
And I was just really curious. I know you've been in so many films. The Good Girl, Roadhouse, Wyatt Earp, or just some that come to mind. Great Balls of Fire. I was just curious, as far as, obviously I'm going to guess that you prefer being a musician over an actor, but I just wanted to kind of get your take on that industry and how you kind of got into the acting business, and what do you like about it?
What do I like about it? I like getting. I'm pretty mercenary when it comes to film. I like getting paid.
Right.
I don't like having to fall down. So, I mean, I can starve on my own, and I auditioned. There were some people that were working in the booking agency that I worked with, and Allison Anders, who's made a number of indie movies and now is working in television. Orange is the New Black. She directs a bunch of those episodes and things.
Very
like that.
cool.
She did a movie called Border Radio, and that was the first thing I did.
Yeah, 87.
It's really rewarding.
Yeah.
Once you make it happen, and you feel like you did your best in a scene, and everyone else did their best, and you actually felt like you were there, it's pretty thrilling. And you don't need an audience to applaud or to say, "Oh, I get it." You kind of know that it's happening.
Sure. Again, not many musicians make the transition over into film successfully. I mean, there are a handful, but I mean, like when you said that Border Radio, I mean, you did Roadhouse, Great Balls of Fire, Pure Country, Wyatt Earp, all those were within like a 4 or 5 year span. It was like you really just dove into the whole acting thing and ran with it and had a pretty good success with it.
Mercenary.
So,
Yeah. Well, it was a good time, and I enjoyed it, and I still do it now and then, but I've kind of aged out of a lot of those parts, and I'm also touring quite a bit, and I've just made a new solo record. X tours a lot, and so not as much time. I don't live close to Los Angeles. I live in the Bay Area, so...
Right. I have caught you on a few episodes of some different CSI Miami and a few things like that in the last...
Roswell.
Yeah, Roswell and stuff.
Yeah,
so
it was cool.
Awesome. I've always wanted to ask you about the acting thing because everyone's always asking you about X, and I just was really curious as to what your take was on, the business and how you got started. So that's awesome.
I'm glad you think that I transitioned successfully, and I'll take that compliment. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I don't know how successful it has been. I did a lot of work in a lot of questionable productions. Some of the ones that you mentioned, Roadhouse being one of them.
I really like Roadhouse. I've seen the movie about 13 times, I think. So.
But John got punched out in that movie.
Not usually what you hear from women.
Hey, Sam Elliott's in that movie, so hey.
That's true. He's very handsome. And so is the Sways.
Yes, he is.
Once again, we have Mr. John Doe of X here on the Church of Rock, KSKQ, coming out of Southern Oregon. And we really appreciate you coming on and being with us tonight, John, and talking about, your new book, Under the Big Black Sun, Personal History of L.A. Punk. Really appreciate that. And a fascinating, I think, brilliant idea. And I'm not sure who came up with this or how it came about, but this book is also on audio CD. So that, I think, is just an amazing idea. And you actually have the people from the scene who wrote the chapters or reading their chapters. Is this not correct?
That's true. We just got an offer, and we talked to some of the authors, and they were for it, and it all happened within probably 4 days.
Wow.
People would come in. It would only take them maybe an hour or so to read their parts, and I act as kind of the narrator, so I had the bulk of the work to read, but I think in 15 or 20 years it's going to be a pretty cool document. I mean, assuming that people still want to listen to it.
Well, and it's pretty cool because actually you'll reach an audience under 30 that doesn't normally pick up a book that these days,
true.
They tend to be so into the computers and phones. So I think that's a great idea to reach a bigger audience.
You can take it with you because it also is on a download and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's sweet. Man, it must have been a blast to get together with the old gang, and I can just imagine all the conversations you had outside of the recording process of the chapters. Can you elaborate a little bit on some of the good times you got to share with your partners in crime?
It was just good to see that everybody's there because a lot of people were not.
Yeah.
Right.
And I guess like the classic rock musicians have better health care and maybe better drugs, and we had really cheap drugs and no health care, so I don't know. But it was great. I was only there for a couple days. Tom was doing a lot of that, but the fact that everyone was into doing it, and we've done a couple of live events as well where Exene and I and Charlotte Caffey and I have done readings and then Q&A and things like that. But everyone who is part of that scene is pretty fiercely loyal to each other and to the the experience that we had.
Yeah, that really comes across well when you read the book too. The camaraderie between all you guys is just reading the individual chapters and how everybody gave credit to each other in the scene. It's just really a fun read. And I mean, I've been seeing you since, well, like I said, way back in the early 80s when you started your solo career with your first album, and you actually have a new album that you just released, and you're also touring and promoting that. So you're just this fast-paced rock and roll guy out doing his thing. You want to tell us a little bit about The Westerner, your new audio CD?
Yeah, it's on CD, it's on vinyl, it is on download, and I'm starting a tour July 5th in Chicago. We're doing 16 shows in a row.
Yikes.
From
Wow.
Chicago to Atlanta. And I'm going to pull my socks up, and I'm going to go to bed early as I can, and let other people drive. And,
Smart man.
I'll be in Portland, I think, the 27th or 28th of June.
Nice.
Cool,
So,
cool.
yeah. Pretty quick trip around the United States. And the Westerner has got a lot of sounds from the desert. It's really it's got some psychedelic stuff, but it's kind of rootsy, and well, you can play a track and then people will hear what it's like.
Yeah, and I know you've done a song on there that was originally written by Exene, which I think is Alone in Arizona.
Yes.
And I think you kind of have a special sort of dedication or personal feeling about that song that maybe the song wasn't originally written about, but a person in mind when you perform it that you think about. You want to tell us about, is it Blake, I believe?
Yeah, Michael Blake wrote was a friend of mine. He was like my brother, and he wrote Dances with Wolves. He
Wow.
wrote the novel and then the screenplay. And he was a great writer. He passed away in 2015, and I was just writing a bunch of songs about him and using him as a character. I think of him as the Westerner because he was from New Mexico and he lived in Tucson. And Exene wrote the song, Alone in Arizona. I loved the song on her last record, which I think was 2 or 3 years ago. And so I did a version of it, and yeah, Michael's very, very much involved in making this record and helped me find the cover and all kinds of things, even from the great beyond.
Right on, man. That's great.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So then X is touring. I know you just said that you had some tour dates coming up. X is also touring all summer, right? In August, have a lot of dates coming up?
Yeah, I think we've got about 3 weeks of shows from the Midwest through the East Coast.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the West Coast in probably November, December, like we normally do.
Great. Yeah, I'm seeing some Chicago, New York, Philly dates, and I'm like, when are you coming to the West Coast again? So
Yeah, it'll be December or November.
sweet. Great.
We'll be there.
Xmas.
That's cool.
Xmas.
I just wanted to take 1 second, John, too, to thank you. We actually took our daughter to see X a couple of months back. You were just very gracious, very kind, and you took the time out to sign an autograph and take a picture with her. And I know you're a busy guy and don't always have time to do things like that, but just thanks for being so approachable. It really made an impression on her, so thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure, I got a soft spot for kids.
Well, the Reverend and Sister Tracy here, their daughter Audrey, who they just referred to, actually was who I met there standing in front of the Star Theater in Portland, Oregon, and that's how I met Reverend Moody here, and this all came together and all came to fruition tonight with your help. So it's just been a super pleasure to share this whole evening with you.
Right on.
Yeah, we're very grateful. Thank you so much, John. We appreciate you taking the time, man.
Pleasure's mine. Maybe sometime I'll get up to Grants Pass or Medford or closer to you.
Well, we're trying to get you here, and I'm going to work on it and make it happen.
Do it, man.
We'd be so thrilled to have you, and we look forward. If not, we definitely look forward to the next show in Portland. And by all means, if you can stop off in Medford, that'd be great. We'll get you right into the studio.
Right on.
Steve, take it out. Steve, would you like to take out the interview with any final thoughts or questions for John, my friend?
Oh, I just want to say congratulations on the book, the success of the book. It's doing great sales on Amazon, and everywhere else, and in your local bookstores if you can find one. And I just wanted to say thank you once again, and I'll see you on the road in either promotion of one of your albums, books, movies, or whatever you're doing next.
It's a deal, man. You keep coming, and I'll keep coming back.
Right on, brother. Thank you so much.
Good luck,
All
John.
right, guys.
Yeah, we love you, man.
Have a good night.
Thank you, John Doe.
Okie dokie.
All right.
Goodbye.
We're grateful. Thank you, my friend.
Yes, sir.
That was an interview with John Doe, legendary actor, musician, writer, frontman for the band X. And, I want to say thanks to John Doe, but more importantly, right now, Tracy, it's important to say thanks to Steve Weskirchen, who's sitting right here, for really conducting a really professional interview and for setting this up and making it happen. We appreciate you being a part of this tonight, bro.
Oh, man, it was so much fun. I've been just waiting for this night to get here, and it's just been a blast with you guys. KSKQ Radio, the Church of Rock.